Good evening, Milton. I'm Liz Dillon. I am your town moderator. Welcome to our town meeting pre-show before the special town meeting. I'm here with Tom Caldwell, our wonderful Warrant Committee chair. Good evening, Tom.
Good evening, Liz. It's great to see you, and it's great to be here.
It's great to see you. So we have 6 articles for the upcoming special town meeting, which begins on June 16th at 7:30 in the high school auditorium, as usual, Monday, June 16th. So do you want to just dive right in to these articles, Tom?
Absolutely, Liz. Let's get started with Article 1.
Great. That sounds wonderful.
But very briefly, I would like to just say one thing. I'd really like to thank our select board and town administrator. This comes from the Warrant Committee. As you had indicated, and many of you now know, there are 6 articles on our current warrant. And previous to this, there were several additional articles. There were some that we didn't reach during our annual town meeting. Nothing of tremendous importance in terms of timing. But in speaking with the town administrator and the select board, they were willing to pull a few of those articles off the warrant for us to allow the warrant committee and obviously the other boards and committees that were submitting some of our articles a little more time to refine some of the wording and perhaps in other cases get some additional public comment. So I'd just like to thank the select board and also the town administrator for just helping the warrant committee out and town meeting a little bit by just reducing the size of the warrant.
Wonderful. Thanks for making that point, Tom, and I'm sure it was much appreciated. So thanks for raising that. I appreciate it.
It was, and not to belabor the point, but this year has been a very busy year for the town, and we have a lot of great volunteers and elected officials who are doing great work every night of the week. And just given the larger issues that we've been deciding over the course of the year, the override among one of many, we kind of got backed up a little bit as a town. However, what we have here, I think, addresses everything that we need for not only the end of this fiscal year, but moving forward in fiscal year 2026, and obviously in anticipation of our fall town meeting this year.
Yes, these articles, which we'll dive into in a second, mostly are, as you mentioned, things that have to be on the warrant for this go-around and also affect the next fiscal year more immediately. So again, I think you're right when you say that the warrant committee, as you noted, really appreciated, and I think town meeting really appreciates as well, the ability to move some of those off to a later town meeting to really focus on these 6 articles that the select board and town administrator identified as being really critical at this time. So thank you.
Absolutely.
Do you want to jump into Article 1, Tom?
Sure, absolutely. So Article 1 is a typical article that we see, the town meeting sees from time to time. This is amend the appropriations for the reserve fund. Most of you know that the reserve fund is a fund that we've kept in the town for many, many years for unforeseen financial circumstances to address any shortfalls or any emergencies that the town may have. We frequently like to see a nice full reserve fund. The reserve fund is controlled by the Warrant Committee. Of course, as you can see in this article, the town meeting has the authority to is the only body in the town that has authority to put money in the reserve fund, and the Warrant Committee allocates that money. And now this is a $300,000 allocation. And what we, in our work up to our annual town meeting and all our work on the override budget and our work with the schools, we've identified there is a potential shortfall in the school budget coming up. So when we're looking to close the books at the end of this fiscal year, we may be short we may be short funds in the school budget. However, this will cover any shortfall that there may be. That will be identified after this upcoming meeting. Like I said, as the town accountant, the town financial director, the town administrator, and the school committee close the book. So we will see what happens. The warrant committee will be ready to allocate the funds to the school if necessary. It's already something that we've discussed as a committee. And if that money is not used, it falls back into free cash.
Now, I can think of 3 questions that the good people at home might be thinking of. So first of all, can you explain to everybody what is free cash? How does it get certified? And where does that money come from? Because some people might not be familiar with that term.
Okay, well, free cash is, I think the best way to explain free cash is kind of the money that comes back at the end of the year. So at town meeting, the town meeting being the legislative body of the town appropriates all the funds from the general fund that we collect, tax levy and other monies, state assistance. And so, for example, the fire department we could use. Some of you may remember there were two open positions in the fire department. Of course, the fire chief and the department, they seek to fill those positions through applications and the service process. If those positions go unfilled, there's obviously an allocation for those positions. Those then come back, and when they come back, they go to free cash. And at the end of the fiscal year, when we have all these takebacks from the various committees or departments of the various departments of the town, it's a pool of money, and that pool of money is the free cash. That number is submitted to the Department of Revenue, which certifies it and says, this is free cash now the town can use. So that's really how free cash usually comes about. It's probably the most straightforward way to explain it.
So question 1A, Tom, is that this is money that's allocated in the budget but wasn't used. So it was appropriated from the budget that was allocated to a specific purpose, wasn't used for whatever reason, and now is free for the town to use, and the warrant committee decides.
Correct. And what we do usually, like I said, town meeting, they're the ones who will make that decision to put it in the reserve fund. If they make the decision as we're asking them to do in Article 1, it goes into the reserve fund, and then at that point, the warrant committee will reallocate it. One thing we did last year, just for an example of the warrant committee's process in terms of the reserve fund, Public Works came to us and they were in need of a wood chipper. Wood chipper had broken. We were actually borrowing one from the town of Canton. So they came to us. There was a dire need. Obviously, we had a very stormy year. And obviously Canton wanted their wood chipper back. So we made a small allocation to allow the Department of Public Works to buy a wood chipper, which they are expensive. You'd be surprised, but something that the town
I am
needed.
not surprised. I can imagine.
Yeah. And so essentially, it was that type of emergency. So, we made the allocation from the reserve fund and to satisfy that department's need.
Thanks for those examples, Tom. The second question that I'm thinking that the people might have is when the annual budget closes out. So we're here in June. When does that annual budget close?
So the budget closes, the end of our fiscal year is June 30. So it would be June 30, 2025. Previous to that, the chair of the warrant committee or their designee will go to and meet with the town finance director and the town administrator, and will make those allocations to free cash. So what we are presented as the chair of the warrant committee is, this is how much, say, the fire department's giving back. This is how much the police department's giving back. This is how much, say, for example, maybe the school is giving back. And then what I do is I, as the warrant committee chair, would certify that, and then it would go to the Department of Revenue, where they would then certify free cash, where then it could be then reallocated and used by the town.
So just to clarify for the people watching at home, you said this is a pretty standard article that we'd see about this point of time in the year because we're almost at the close. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. And then my third question is, if you could explain a little bit, you explained the process, which was super helpful as far as how that money gets decided about how to be allocated. But if you could also explain what percentage, if you happen to know, is this $300,000? Is this a large sum of the free cash? Is this a small percentage? What kind of a dent are we making in our total free cash, if you happen to know?
I do not know what the total of free cash will be. I can say, and we commented in the annual town meeting, that our reserve fund is getting rather low. So obviously, as the warrant committee, obviously kind of always looking to next year and what's unforeseen, we like to keep that reserve fund up really high for these situations, whether it's schools, police, fire, library, and we have those funds available for the town. I do not know that number, but I think the town and town meeting will have a little clarity in the next month or so. Well,
that's really helpful because, we have this $300,000 and you said it's, you're thinking about addressing it as far as any particular shortfall in the school budget. But that decision, I take it, hasn't been made yet, that you will have to decide at some point in the future where to allocate it, depending on what the needs are.
Correct. I expect in our conversations throughout the year with the school department and the school committee, we had identified this this $300,000 sum as something that may be in play. And I think at the end of the year, when the school has a better idea of their budget and what their needs will be to cover the bills, the Warrant Committee will be there. And we so this is something that's already been previously identified that the committee has discussed. So I can confidently say that the Warrant Committee will be approving any funds for the school.
I know we discussed it when I was a member of the Warrant Committee, so I appreciate that. Anything else that we want to talk about? Article 1.
No, just this is a standard article, and as the chair of the Warrant Committee, my message to town meeting is let's keep our reserve fund up nice and high, the best we can.
Perfect, thank you. So moving on to our article number 2, can you explain this to the wonderful people of Milton?
Yes, I can. So this is a property tax exemption, and when you look at it, some people in the committee said it looked kind of scary looking, because we have all these cites to Mass General Laws, Chapter 59.
There sure are a lot of cites.
Section 5, and for the viewers at home or anybody who is really curious who's looking at the warrant, when you look up, if you wanted to go to mass.gov, you can look up MGL Chapter 59, Section 5, and it is a very long statute. But to get to the point though, as to Article 2, this is another tax exemption for seniors, veterans, surviving spouses, and minor children of deceased parents. There are 3 clauses in this. This is a tax exemption that is already given and offered by the town of Milton. The only difference in Article 2 is that we're tying it to the Consumer Price Index, COLA. So essentially what this is saying is that the better we do, the better our seniors and veterans will do in terms of their tax exemptions. So we're tying it to the cost of living. So we can only expect their exemptions to go up as opposed to going down. And again, this is just to answer some financial uncertainty for some of our seniors or those in the town who are on fixed incomes, disabled, or whatever you can imagine, who can avail themselves of these statutory reductions for their property tax to allow them to stay in town and continue to enjoy a very nice life here in Milton.
That's helpful. One question that I can imagine people asking, and I'm sure they will at town meeting, but as far as the cost of living increase, so can you explain to me that it's not tied to COLA now? Is it just a flat rate for people
It would just
currently?
It's just flat. And
Okay.
this I think is far more proactive as people say, I wouldn't say enter uncertain financial times, but obviously given our situation here in the town where, we are seeing taxes go up, this allows people to get the full benefit year after year after year. I think we often hear, the best example is, your salary, your employment salary, getting those cost of living adjustments and how important they are. Sometimes they're very small, but if you are on a fixed income, it's very important. That's an electric bill, groceries. So the Warrant Committee, as we approach and discuss the override at length, there were additional tax exemption articles for some members of our community against seniors. We feel very strongly about this article. We asked the town meeting pass this article. And I think in terms of the numbers of people, there aren't that many people in town who avail themselves of these programs. I want to say maybe it's in the 1,500 or so, the various programs the town offers. So this is something that's very important, and we believe will allow those who are on those fixed incomes or reduced incomes to stay in the town.
And Tom, can you explain for people where that money is going to come from? So if our surviving spouses, veterans, seniors, et cetera, are having less tax, where does that money come from for Milton?
So again, like some of our other tax exemptions that were passed at the annual town meeting, this is essentially just spreads the burden out throughout the town. And in our previous discussions concerning other tax exemptions, that really comes down to dollars per resident who is paying a property tax. So it's not a large amount of money This is our senior and veterans programs. They're very small in terms of applicants and those who are in the program. So it's not a lot of money. And I think in the discussions the Warrant Committee has, the benefits that seniors, veterans, others give to the community in terms of diversity and experience, their involvement. These are the people you want to be able to see stay in town. And if there's one little thing that we can do, we would like to do it. And that's really what Article 2 is all about.
Perfect. Anything else to add on Article 2 before we flip to Article 3?
No, other than that, this is one of the articles that there's no recommendation in the warrant. And maybe if we can talk a little bit more about that, but a recommendation from the Warrant Committee has been submitted, and we are asking that the town vote yes.
Perfect. Thank you. And now turning to Article 3 regarding the floodplain. Can you explain that for people?
Okay. As most of us know, Milton lies in a floodplain district given our how close we are to.
I know based on my basement until I got it fixed recently. Go on.
So this is something that the town is tied to the federal government. And our floodplains basically lie in a lot of East Milton. And it's obviously from the Atlantic and the Neponset River estuary and some of the surrounding bodies of water. What this addresses is your insurance on your home and whether or not you need flood insurance and what level of flood insurance that you need. The federal government redoes their floodplain maps based upon their climate data, tide data, a variety of things where I cannot opine on accurately. But they reset the flood map. So they either extend it, they draw it back, expand it, whatever. But it's done every several years. They've redone the floodplain map for the town of Milton. The floodplain district, you'll hear this word. We're going to hear it a little bit later on in this program, overlay district.
Right.
This is an overlay. This supersedes any overlay district in the town. The floodplain district, obviously for safety and everything else, is the penultimate district. So it cannot be altered, cannot be changed. Essentially this is the guidance for the state for insurance companies to say, like, this is how much a rate should be in the town for a dwelling or a structure.
So this is basically just updating our existing, so we have an existing floodplain map and this is just updating it based on the current federal map, is that correct?
Correct. Now this is under Chapter 275, Section 7 of our general bylaws. That's where our floodplain overlay district is mapped out. Now, we were previously before town meeting as far back as 2012, where we had our first iteration of the floodplain district. It was amended again in 2021 and now here in 2025. This is a FEMA type program. This is a program that is governed by FEMA and from the federal end, the Department of Conservation and Recreation on the state side. So not only does it update the map itself, but there are also just some small other amendments to our district. As indicated in our comment, they're just changing some addresses, expanding some definitions. But I think the biggest thing for town meeting and the residents of the town to be concerned about is that floodplain map. And the changes aren't immense, but if you live in one of these areas, and I'm sure you do know, this is something to be mindful of. This is governed by statute, and so it's something that we have to do.
Right, I was going to ask. So this is a thing that the statute provides a requirement for, or?
Correct.
Okay.
This is codified in state and federal law. I can make a. We saw in the annual town meeting the discussion of the Brook Road overlay district. So similar, where it was a map update.
Right.
Right. So this is the similar thing, but it's for the floodplain.
Okay. Thank you. Anything else on this Article 3?
No, it's very straightforward. There's it's a very straightforward article, and I think we address any questions anyone may have in the comment.
Perfect. And now on to Article 4, that wonderful overlay district that you were talking about earlier. So I know you just briefly explained, but if you can explain what an overlay district is before we get into the details of this East Milton overlay.
Okay, so an overlay district is exactly what it says. It's a district that overlays like we have several districts in our town, various residential districts, a couple of commercial districts. So an overlay essentially is a district upon a district. Mm-hmm. And it sets forward like the floodplain or the brook road. It sets forth additional requirements for building. It sets forward maybe expansion of building, but it adds an extra layer of zoning on top of what already exists.
So the existing zoning stays. This just overlays.
Yeah, it's almost like it's like a steroid, mm-hmm. and it's set to obviously to certain areas where there are specific needs or specific wants of the town in terms of development.
Okay.
So it sets forward, it becomes some additional criteria for builders or anyone doing work in one of these districts on a property to be mindful of.
Perfect. And then with respect to this Article 4, the East Milton overlay, what does this specifically entail? Because I think it was helpful to get that background of what an overlay is, but what does this overlay specifically do?
This is an attempt, a very good move by the planning board to reinvigorate East Milton Square. And when I say reinvigorate, it's looking to kind of bring East Milton Square into the mixed use, make East Milton Square more of a mixed use where you have the mix of the residential, the single family, you have apartment living, and then in addition to that, you have a business district that kind of works in with it. So whether it be a first floor business with an apartment upstairs, diversification of the commercial tenants in the area, beautification, also sets forward certain plans in terms of sidewalks, forward-facing, the structures that are forward-facing at ground level, what the construction would have to entail. So there's very specific things. Mm-hmm. And the planning board did a ton of work over this over the course of a couple of years. We met with the planning board. We had a joint planning board warrant committee meeting where we went through this article paragraph by paragraph and discussed. And of course, it sets forward all the certain building requirements, heights, design standard. And this really, it gives our planning board, it gives the town control. I think we'd like to see some development. Would like to see the expansion of commercial businesses in our commercial districts, and this article addresses that in East Milton Square. It also provides for some affordable housing, parking. So a very comprehensive planning board article. And as you can see from our comment, it addresses the key provisions of this, address the building height, design standards, affordable housing, which was a very important component in the planning board, flexibility of parking, historic, application requirements of builders, and then the review process, which is very important by the planning board. So as you can see on page 21 of the warrant, there's an overlay map which sets forward what the Milton Overlay District is with some of the surrounding streets. And as you can see, this runs right along Granite Avenue, incorporates some of Adams Street, up to Church Street and down to kind of going towards St. Agatha's Parish. Perfect,
thank you. And anything else to add about this Article 4?
This is a very exciting article, mm-hmm. and I think moving forward, we're seeing a lot of building in the town, and I expect we're going to see more. But seeing the residences of the East Milton popping up, and I think this is going to be an excellent thing for the town to be able to control not only what is going on in East Milton Square, but allow for its expansion, keeping in mind also that it's surrounded by single-family neighborhoods. So the planning board put a lot of time into this. This was a unanimous recommendation from our planning board and also a unanimous decision by the Warrant Committee to accept this.
Thank you. So just to go back for a second, between Articles 1 through 4, those were all, the Warrant Committee recommended in favor of all of those articles.
Correct.
And with respect to the ones that don't yet have comments, can you please explain to everybody at home what that process will look like?
Yes. So at the time, the general procedure is the select board approves any article, the warrant in general, and then sends it to the Warrant Committee. At that time, we begin our study of the various articles. And when we are completed, when we receive all the information, we'll have a vote. And the vote could be, we either vote in favor of the article, we vote against the article, or we vote that it be sent back for further study. And there are all sorts of requirements that are attached to those things, and they have their own independent significance. However, what we do is we make that vote and then we assign out a comment. And the comment really encapsulates really all of our discussion, whether it's positive or negative or neutral. It doesn't matter. It really kind of includes everything. Now, that is submitted with the warrant when it goes to print. That is the ideal situation. However, given the timing of some of our articles and the select board working on them and then closing the warrant, we kind of receive them just a little bit late in time. Obviously, the goal of the Warrant Committee in the town is to warn the town of everything in the warrant itself, but also give comments to give guidance to the citizens in terms of what their town meeting representatives are discussing, but also to town meeting itself. So when the article is not submitted, and we saw a couple of those, I think, in our first meeting this year, our fall town meeting, the comments are submitted to the town administrator, and they are then prepared on a green sheet. So the green sheet will be available at town meeting on Monday for the articles, for the 4 comments that are not contained in this article. What is also important to know is that they're also put up on the town meeting website.
Right, I was going to mention.
So it's not ideal, I think, and I want to go back to the beginning of our conversation where I give credit to all our boards and committees and all the hard work they're doing. And this was just one of those years where things just got backed up, unfortunately. So while it is obviously the desire to have everything in here, a green sheet will be prepared. It will be available to all town meeting representatives on Monday. But in addition, as they're submitted, they will be available on the town website. 2 additional comments have already been submitted that we voted on and we voted in favor. That was Articles 1 and 2 previously discussed. And obviously we saw floodplain and overlay. Those comments were able to be submitted in the warrant when it went to print, which is the best situation. That was because we met with actually the planning board on these articles prior to the annual town meeting, because we knew that there was going to be a little backup on MBTA and some of the other articles.
Well, before we move to the MBTA, Articles 5 and 6, again, thank you to you and to the Warrant Committee, because we just had our annual town meeting in the beginning of May, and now here we are a month later in June. So I know from experience that it's a lot of work, but thank you for all of that. So please, everyone, if you can look either on the town website, or if you're a town meeting member or planning on attending town meeting Monday, June 16th at 7:30 p.m., please look for the green sheet on the table. Moving right along to Article 5. Before we do, as a reminder, it's set forth in the letter in the very beginning from me, but I will be recusing myself from Articles 5 and 6 at town meeting, and the town meeting will go ahead and elect a temporary moderator at that time. But if you could please explain Article 5, and then we can get into Article 6 regarding the MBTA, I'd appreciate it.
Absolutely. So from our perspective in the Warrant Committee, this is the meat and potatoes of this warrant here. And this is obviously 2 articles that address something that the town has been talking about now for a few years now. And this is our MBTA Communities Act. For those of you, I'm sure we all know, this was before town meeting a couple of years ago. It passed, and I'll get into more of what did pass, but it was passed by town meeting. It was a citizen's petition pursuant to our town charter that overturned the decision of town meeting. We've seen now several rounds of litigation by the town. We also currently are now seeing litigation by some private citizens. And there are also a couple of hanging questions regarding these articles themselves that the Warrant Committee is still waiting to get some information about. But these Article 5 and Article 6 essentially are the zoning for the MBTA communities. Article 5 is a 10% plan. Article 6 is our 25% plan, a 25% plan that was originally passed 2 years ago. Not the same plan. It has been changed dramatically, I would say from my perspective as chair of the Warrant Committee, but it is still a 25% plan. As we all know, we have been designated by the state as a rapid transit community. And under the requirements in the statute, we must adopt zoning of 25% of our housing stock. So that is our requirement as the municipality under a rapid transit designation. The rapid transit designation is based upon the Mattapan high-speed trolley in connection to the Red Line terminus at Ashmont. And obviously our various buses that we have running through the town. The state made that determination. We are still there. We are still designated a rapid transit community. And that does require 25% of the housing stock to be zoned for transit-oriented development. However, pursuant to MBTA communities, that need not be. Usually the talk is that it needs to be within 1/2 mile of the transit district, which we can say is where the high-speed trolley is. Some of us just know is like Elliott Street, Central, Milton Station. So that is really, that is what we're required to do right now under the statute. Now, as I indicated, there's currently a matter pending. Where some private citizens have raised not only the rapid transit designation, but also an unfunded mandate issue, which we've heard about in the past couple of days. And they're going to be down before the Superior Court in Plymouth County to address this alone as Milton. It's a separate lawsuit from some of the other municipalities. Some additional issues were raised, one being the rapid transit designation, and they're going to be heard by the same judge that just recently ruled on some of the other unfunded mandates, which I must mention here were dismissed by the Superior Court. So in terms of the expectation of this new litigation that the private citizens are undergoing right now with Plymouth Superior, there's still that big unknown, and they're frankly not in court until tomorrow. So we don't really expect a decision anytime soon. In terms of that, we could be surprised, but that is probably one of the biggest things that's going on right now in terms of these two articles. However, I can state, and I'm sure most people know, the town administrator and the select board did send an action plan to the state, informed the Commonwealth of Massachusetts and Housing Livable Communities that we are considering a 10% and a 25% articles for MBTA communities. And so right now we are in compliance with the state. However, the state is waiting for a town meeting to make this decision. 10% of our housing stock is essentially what an adjacent community would be. So I can't get into all the nuances of the law, but an adjacent community would be, say, a town that doesn't have any rapid transit, but is next door. So if we had no Mattapan trolley, if we had no buses, but we're next door to Quincy, what's a significant public transportation infrastructure, we would be considered one of those communities.
Okay.
So I can't really cover it all because it really is deep and complex. Many people in our town have been following this. And I know many people know a lot about it.
And I encourage people to go back and watch the Warrant Committee meetings on that as well, if anybody has specific questions, because they're very well covered in those meetings.
They are. And with those meetings too, I think what I, as the chair, what I was very happy was just the collaboration with the planning board. And what we introduced were these kind of hybrid meetings or dual meetings where the planning board would come down as a whole group, have a posted meeting with us, And as we discuss things, make suggestions, amendments, Scrivener errors, they're there to vote on them. We're there to approve them. And I found that given some of these big planning articles that we've handled in the past couple of years, I found that that's been a pretty good approach to our planning for the town. Liz, I know you're an attorney, as am I, and we do have a couple on the Warrant Committee, which is great. In addition to the both of us when you were on there.
Not providing any legal opinions, though. But
that's true.
Fair enough.
But I think too, and a variety of other people, business people, and other various professions. But we're not. There's nobody who's a planning attorney. There's no one who's a municipal attorney. So obviously we look at the planning board and to their expertise. But again, as the Warrant Committee always does, as our appointed citizens, we have a lot to say about it. So, but those types of meetings, I felt I felt as though having them in the room and having that exchange with them was very fruitful and allowed us to understand their articles better and allowed us to give a better product to town meetings so they could try to understand them too.
I hear an underlining theme of cooperation with different boards and committees, which is great to hear.
Yeah, it's very important, I think. As Liz, we're dealing with more complex and complicated issues than the town has ever seen before, whether they be things that the state is asking us to do or just the general, moving forward and growing as a town. I think that the collaboration amongst boards, especially elected boards, I find could be very helpful moving forward.
Wonderful. Is there anything specific about the 10 versus the 25? And when we get to the 25, I'd like you to explain to people kind of what the means by which it got before the Warrant Committee. Because the 10%, as you mentioned, was proposed by the Planning Board.
Correct.
And then the 25, I take it, was not. So how that process got there. But if there's anything else you want to say about Article 5 and the 10, I know we kind of have to talk about them together, but.
Yeah, so that was interesting. Like, how do we address these? I will say that for those of you who have watched the Warrant Committee, we did have a vote on these articles. Yes, we did have these votes on these last week, and the Warrant Committee agreed with the Planning Board and voted to accept Article 5. We were very fortunate. As chair of the Warrant Committee, I was contacted by our citizens who brought forward Article 6, and this is to answer your question. The Planning Board has worked over the course of since the MBTA law came into effect, working on compliance with the statute. They've worked on both a 10% plan, as we see in Article 5, and a 25% plan, which is Article 6. They worked on both simultaneously, did a lot of work, and I would like to say without a town planner. On their own, the 5 members did all this work. Not too long before the Warrant Committee meeting, Article 6, which was the 25% plan, the Planning Board pulled. And there is an upcoming public hearing. I can't speak for the Planning Board themselves, but I think it was a greater refinement that they wanted to do with Article 6. And they only put forward the 10%. Now, the 10% obviously is much different in terms of size of the housing that we would be required to zone for, because that's an important thing. This is zoning only. This is not a requirement to build, but it increases significantly the amount of zoning that we would have to do under the 25% plan, right? It's just simple math. The 10% plan follows more of that, what you would see in an adjacent community, what I explained earlier, just a smaller requirement of the zoning, where the 25 comes in as the rapid transit. So, you're kind of one of those cities that I would say borders Boston. That is the biggest difference. And obviously we would see in Article 5, there wouldn't be as much active building not active building, but really, I think the size of the structures would be a lot smaller, as explained to us by the Planning Board. You wouldn't see as large a structures that you maybe see that was just built over by the Ice House. So they would be smaller, 8-unit max, more obviously market rate. and like I said, fits the definition of if we were designated as an adjacent community. 6 is a designation as a rapid transit community. It, again, is much wider in terms of it touches more of the town. The plan itself, while the original plan that was passed by town meeting a couple of years ago, there was a heavier focus on East Milton. This spreads it out a little bit more throughout the town to the various sub-districts. So while it's I would say from my perspective, it's different from the old 25% plan in terms of, and that's allowed by the statute. Doesn't have to be in the transit district. You can kind of spread the wealth out amongst the town, which I think is the right thing to do. We have a beautiful neighborhood down by Elliott Street. They have more units down there now. There are less units in East Milton, but still a significant amount. And then throughout the rest of the town, they've been kind of sprinkled around Brush Hill Road area, Blue Hill Parkway, those types of things. So the articles are really about size and about how much we're going to zone. And the underlying question, I think, for everybody, and we have the Mattapan trolley, and are we at that rapid transit designation? Well, at this point, we are still a rapid transit community, and we've been still designated that by the state. I think that a lot of people who've read maybe some things online or in the Milton Times or even watched our last town meeting, some of our elected representatives at the State House are attempting to maybe discuss in a little bit more with the state that designation. But as we stand today, Liz, and as we talk today, and as we enter town meeting potentially on the 16th, we are still going to be designated a rapid transit community. The state has required all municipalities to be in compliance with MBTA communities by the middle of July. I want to say July 16th. I could have that date wrong.
I want to say the 14th. But
and I think you might be right.
I'm often right, which is sort of part of the reason why this June town meeting is when it is, my understanding.
Yeah, and this is our opportunity. So we have to make this decision. Where are we going to go? Will it be the 10%? And in saying that, the Warrant Committee has yet to comment. We voted, but we've yet to comment. And I want to talk a little bit more about that in a moment. But we have to make that decision. If we vote yes on Article 5, we're in compliance in a sense, but we're not really in compliance because our designation is not an adjacent community. We're a rapid transit community. So while it does afford some new additional zoning, it's not what the state is asking us to do. So essentially going into July with a 10% plan and with no other significant movement on the state level or with the citizen lawsuit, that very well could be likely where we're headed. The Warrant Committee, in discussing this, I think there were a lot of just unanswered questions. We were very comfortable with the 10% plan, what the planning board brought forward, how they explained it, the work they did. We thought it was a good product. And we approved it. They did not present to us on the 25% plan. From their perspective, it was not ready yet. And then what we saw a couple of weeks later was a citizen's petition.
So explain to me that process of how the citizen's petition comes about. Okay. I'm sure you were about to, but.
Yes. So the citizen's petition, citizens can put anything on town meeting. And you need 10 citizens to sign the petition, craft an article for whatever you'd like the town would like to address. We've seen a variety of citizens petitions over the years at town meeting. Some very serious, like Article 6. Others maybe to address a neighborhood need or concern. Some trying just to prove a point. Mm-hmm. And what is that? Is that's then submitted to the moderator. And that process begins. But it needs to be 10 people from the town who are signatories, who put their name and address out there, and it's listed in the warrant as the proponent.
Registered voters, too.
Registered voters of the town, yes. So what they did, and they were, I want to say that we are very grateful to the citizens that came down to the Warrant Committee and spoke. They proactively reached out to me, and we had them down. And what they presented in Article 6 was the article that the Planning Board was working on. There was maybe one slight change in terms of a severability clause, but what they presented to us was what the Planning Board worked on. And this is what the Planning Board indicated to us was not the final product, that they were still doing some work on public hearings, among other things. But they came down, they presented it, obviously their failings in terms of the law, requirements with the law, the 25% rapid transit designation, and another one of the speakers kind of gave his own financial breakdown of what he saw Article 6, the 25%, what that would look like for the town. Because that was really the focus of the Warrant Committee. You know, there's a lot of personal opinions, but I think really what we were looking on is like, what does this mean for the town financially? Mm-hmm. And there are several things in play that we discussed. We have some 40B developments in the town. We have not reached our 10% cap for 40B requirements for the state. So we have 7 projects. We have our recently passed state required ADU, and now we have MBTA. So I think a lot of the discussion of the Warrant Committee was, what are our future costs? Right. What is this going to cost the town? What's the breakdown? We had a couple of members of the Warrant Committee do their own research. Mm-hmm. We had the fine gentleman who came down and presented in Article 6 give his numbers. We had the state consultant, RKG, gave the numbers. And what we found was no one's numbers were really the same. And, you know, we're all taking a guess here, but, you know, there were certain criteria that each person, including 2 members of our Warrant Committee, broke down and looked at and compared to the state numbers. So we had some where it wasn't going to cost the town anything to have new zoning of this nature, 25%. It was going to cost the town a lot of money, and then we had another that it was going to cost the town a little bit, you know. So it was all these different numbers, and I think it really we don't know to a degree, but that was really the focus of the Warrant Committee, and what a lot of people were discussing was, is the town ready for this expansion? And there was some talk of, we're going really fast, and you know, maybe should we slow down a little bit? Obviously, the ADU, you know, it's a great idea. We think it's going to be beneficial for those in town. But again, that coupled with the 40B and the MBTA, there was just that concern about infrastructure, resources, services, and frankly was coming off the heel of the override. You know, it was really why we zeroed in the way we did on the potential future costs. So
it's a lot of work, again, by the Warrant Committee.
It was.
And the Planning Board.
And
the citizens. All in a lot of work that everybody did, and we all appreciate that.
Yeah, very much so. And it's a lot to digest. And, you know, you're kind of looking and you want to be able to say this is what it's going to look like in 2 years, in 4 years, in 6 years, 10 years from now. You know, and we plan for it. And unfortunately, these are things that the state has told us we need to do, and we've reacted accordingly. And so that was just some of the nervousness in making recommendations on these 2 articles that the Warrant Committee had, because we really we don't have that crystal ball. Right. And again, many citizens said that, you know, this is a pretty big expansion potentially of the population of the town, nothing we've seen before. Mm-hmm. So again, a little trepidation in terms of our recommendation, and I think the desire to get as much information as possible to share that with town meeting, so they can help, you know, make the most informed decision for the future of the town.
I appreciate that. And so, as you mentioned before, the Warrant Committee has voted in favor of Article 5, not in favor of Article 6, and we're going to see the comments forthcoming on the website, and then also the green sheet at town meeting, if I got that correct.
Yes, we are. This is not, we're not trying to delay our
Sure.
comments at all. I think it's the Warrant Committee's desire to get every bit of information we have. Because whether or not the town meeting agrees with us, we are merely the advisory board in sharing that information. At the end of the day, it's important that they know everything.
Right.
So the vote that they make and the decision that they make is the most informed decision and the right decision for the town. So we're working on that currently. Obviously, as information changes and as new information comes in, the Warrant Committee is very cognizant of that, and potentially, I can't speak for the committee, obviously, Liz, you know that, but that might change some people's perspective.
Sure.
Obviously the clock is ticking here, which it makes it a little difficult for us, but I can't say there would be any change, but I'm sure we're going to discuss some of this new information we receive. And when I say that, the unfunded mandate, any further information that we get from town council, from the select board this evening, would be very helpful. And we can share that with town meeting. That was part of our discussion the other night when we voted on these, that there was still so much information outstanding that we felt as if though we couldn't decisively say, this is it, take it all, and tell us what you think. So just a little bit of frustration on part of the Warrant Committee in kind of making the decision. There was talk of some people weren't comfortable voting because of the missing pieces, and certainly we're working with the Attorney General's office. So this isn't any one specific person or board in town.
Situation.
Yeah, this goes beyond the borders of Milton to Beacon Hill, and working with them and the good work that they do up there. But we're kind of waiting to see what happens. But we will have a comment ready. But I think it's important. We have supported Article 5. Article 6 we did vote no on.
Right.
And whether or not that changes before town meeting remains to be seen.
Well, I appreciate, and I think we can all appreciate your hard work all the way up until the very end on this, with so much going on and changing day by day. So I really appreciate that. Anything else on Articles 5 or 6 to add?
No.
For now, knowing that you might have some more to add later.
No, well, I want to say, I know this is probably one thing in the town that most everybody's talking about. And I know that everyone, in speaking to your neighbors and what you read in online and in the paper, but if you have the opportunity, just take a good look at the warrant. Okay, that's really going to inform you and give you an idea of what these two plans look like and how they're going to affect the town. Now, I would like to say oftentimes this is only zoning. Okay, so there's no mandate to build here, but so I want to kind of reiterate that to some people where this is not like an AD. This is not even like the AD. This is not something the town or the state is saying these must be. You got to flatten the land and start to build. This is just zoning. So whether or not we see that next step in building, we don't know. So again, I just want to make that point again, that this is not, the state is not telling us to build, they're telling us to zone. And then obviously what happens from that remains to be seen. But I know that there are some towns that have done the zoning and are in compliance and have active zoning now, and things are going well. There are other towns that the building is going on, and they're not seeing issues. There are some towns that are kind of thinking about scaling it back a little bit. But again, those are unique to those towns. Right. And again, we are designated as a rapid transit community as we speak now, so we're a little different from them. So it doesn't really, what other municipalities are doing doesn't necessarily fit what Milton needs to do.
Well, to your point about looking at the warrant, I'd like to encourage everybody, if you don't have a copy of it, you can access it at Town Hall or again, on the Town of Milton town meeting website. It's available there. You can download it or get yourself a hard copy. If you're a town meeting member, you would have been mailed one to your home. So people should feel free to go get a copy and take a look, especially at all the good work that the Warrant Committee has done.
Because, Liz, I want to ask you, I'm not in the position to ask questions, but do you have any questions as to Article 5 or 6? Just given the, you know, the interest of the town in the matter. Is there anything that I can help with?
No, I think you've really done a good job of explaining how these two came to be and sort of the differences between the two of them. And I think that's mostly what I've heard questions about in my day-to-day. So I know that the good people of town meeting will have a chance to ask those questions. And of course, if individual members of the town who aren't town meeting members want to ask questions, all they need to do is email the moderator. My email address is on the town website. People can email me, and then I can or cannot, at my discretion, grant permission. But certainly other people might have opinions, and we welcome that as well. So
there's a lot of opinions on these two,
and a lot of information.
And a lot of information, and you know, that's where sometimes it can be a problem, right? Where people aren't getting the full story. But I think really when you look at these two, it's the amount and it's the size. So it's rapid transit. We're going to be zoning more land area, and you know, potentially have more active dwellings or units being constructed in town. The Article 5 is smaller. Obviously, we're going down to 10%, and the structures would be smaller. Yet, as we stand now, that is not a compliant plan with the state. So there are still some outstanding questions. The Warrant Committee, again, wants to get those answers to. We'll see if we get them. But stay tuned.
I appreciate all of your hard work, again, and the work of the Warrant Committee, the Select Board, the Planning Board, and all of our town boards and committees, elected and appointed officials, as well as citizens, for investing so much time and interest in all of these 6 articles. And again, a reminder, people should please feel free to come, whether you're a town meeting member or not, to our upcoming town meeting on June 16th, 7:30 at the high school. And if need be, we'll continue June 17th also at the high school. And if we need it, I don't think we will, but the 18th as well. So put it in your calendar, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Great to see you again, Tom.
It's great to see you too, and good to see everybody. Town meeting on the 16th.
Wonderful.
Three, two, one.